took great joy in showing my new husband on our honeymoon all of these delicious ways to eat seafood throughout Europe, and Normandy was one of his favorites. So I've done a little bit of an easier take on a mussels in Normandy style recipe for you today. And we're going to start with the all-important potatoes. A little bit of extra virgin olive oil. So I'm gonna fry these in oil first and then towards the end add some butter. Now I have rinsed these potatoes and drained them well to release as much starch as possible, which is going to give us a much more crispy end result. So this may take up to 15 minutes to get them to the point where they're sort of starting to collapse but still holding their shape. We can put a fork through them and then I'll show you what we're gonna do with the mussels. So we've given our potato slices about 15 minutes at this point. You can see that they've started to go translucent, but they're still holding their shape, which is perfect. So I'm going to reduce the heat. Well, actually, I'm going to swap the heat over. I'm going to put that one down there. I want a little bit more color on those. And then when they're almost done, I'm going to finish them with some butter. This is a French recipe after all. So we're going to move our mussel pot a little bit closer. We're going to start with a tiny amount of extra virgin olive oil, just enough to move these leeks around. Really finely sliced so that they will really collapse and become a part of the sauce. All in there. So I want to sweat these, saute them just enough until they're sort of becoming translucent. Might take sort of anywhere from 2 to 5 minutes. Really don't want any color on these. I want them to be quite blonde. So I'm really happy our leeks have totally collapsed. There's a tiny bit of color. So I want to deglaze my leeks. I've got a beautiful apple liqueur Calvados. I will tell you again. So this is Calvados. So it's an apple-based liqueur, specialty from Normandy. You can just smell it as it's deglazing the pan. We want to release most of the alcohol in that because it's quite strong. And then we're going to add our cider. So this is the base of our sauce. Normandy, famous for their dairy and their apple products. And no doubt they came up with all of these alcohol alternatives because they have surplus apples. So I'm just going to cook this just enough to release a lot of that alcohol before I put in the next ingredients. Our apple liqueur and apple cider have evaporated to about the consistency that I'd like, probably about a third, because we do have some liquid being released from our mussels. I was just about to put them in and I nearly forgot a key ingredient. We've got some beautiful Dijon mustard here, and this adds a nice bit of warmth to the base of our sauce, but also very French. And we're going to add a nice big knob of butter to that dish. And the other butter is going to go into our potatoes so that our mussels and our potatoes are ready just at the same time. And we're going to add our mussels. I would push them away from you ever so slightly because they do have a bit of liquid in them. I'll just make sure that they are all sort of evenly distributed, no big piles or anything. Beautiful Australian mussels, we've given them a good clean. I'm going to put the lid on. They could take anywhere up to 10 minutes, but sort of 7 to 8 should be enough. It's a bit of an urban myth that the ones that don't open are bad. In Australia, it's really tough to find a bad mussel. All of our wonderful farmers have done such a good job of taking care of any bad ones for us ahead of time that it's usually a non-issue. So our potatoes, we're getting to start to see a little bit of color. I encourage you to take your time with cooking these so that they're cooked through but a little bit crispy on the outside. And in good French fashion, a generous knob of butter, which is going to add a little bit more caramelization to them. And they'll be ready at about the same time as our mussels. I'm just going to reduce the heat on that so our butter doesn't burn, instead softens and caramelizes those potatoes. I'm really happy with the caramelization. That butter has just made all the difference. So let's check our mussels. So those mussels have all opened up beautifully. Now I'm just going to stir through some creme fraiche, just in case this wasn't creamy and decadent enough. So I'm just going to put our potatoes sort of to one side. So I still want to be able to see them, so that we can serve this at the table to share. We've got our mussels. I'm using a slotted spoon to start with. That way we can gauge how much liquid we're going to add to capture all of those solid bits, all of the chewable bits, and any mussels that may have escaped their shell. Okay, so we've got all of our mussels in there, and most of the leeks. I'm just gonna pour over a little bit more of our sauce. So the potatoes at the bottom will start to absorb this. You could further reduce this if you wanted to, but I'm quite happy leaving it as is. Now we've got some parsley and some beautiful dill leaves. As soon as that dill hits the heat of the mussels, it's just gorgeous. So I'm just gonna poke a few of these mussels up so that we can have that nice little visual clue of what we're about to dig into. And if you're a bread eater, I would definitely be serving this up with some crusty bread to soak up all of that sauce at the bottom. But there is our Normandy style mussels and potatoes.